All right. Coming to you from Philly Boys in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, it's Kyle Henderson of BamaInsider.com alongside Tony Tsoukalas. What's up, Tony? How you been, man?
Man, we got some cloudy weather today. I'm kind of in a cloudy mood, but got some cloudy weather. How about you?
No, man, I'm feeling good. You know, it's LSU week, so
that's something to get us pumped up.
Yeah, I'm excited to see kind of what Alabama and LSU have in store for each other. I know that some people are excited because Alabama is now ranked number 2, so behind Georgia, and I think a lot of people were I think some people expected it, but what was kind of the takeaway?
I think some people are fake excited about that. I think, if you really cut down to the heart of an Alabama fan, they're a little bit disappointed that Alabama's not number 1. But I think that they realize what it could mean for the program in terms of a motivational standpoint. Because let's face it, it's hard to be number 1 all the time. And I'm sure Alabama players, they might not say it, but they probably don't like being number 2. It's not normal for them. I mean, they've been almost unanimously number 1 in the last poll, and then the 2 weeks before that, they were the unanimous number 1 team in both the coaches and the AP poll. So, it's got to be something different for them, but it's really early. It's too early to start worrying about these kind of things, and I think Nick Saban kind of made that clear in his press conference last night.
We are coming to you from Philly Boys in Tuscaloosa. You can come in and get your tailgate special, only $49.99. Includes a ton of cheesesteak and 3 feet of fries. Our favorite part, right?
3 feet of fries.
3 feet of fries.
We're not as excited about it as we are and normally. I got to get that 3 feet of fries from you.
Game will be on CBS at 7 p.m. Alabama has won 6 in a row against LSU. Coming into this game, you spoke with one of our LSU rivals, team riders. What I was reading the article this morning. Said LSU was healthy going into this game, which in both teams I felt have had an open week, so it's an extra week to prepare for each other. What else did you get a pulse from? Is it the LSU team rider?
Yeah, LSU is going to have to be healthy because they're going up against a big challenge in Alabama, and they're going to need a lot of things to go their way in this game if they're going to make it close, if they're going to even pull out an upset. The defense is there for LSU. They've got a good defense, but the offense, it doesn't seem like it's going to move the ball too much against Alabama. They don't have much of a passing game, and Alabama stops the run better than any team in the nation. So, how are you going to move the ball that way is going to be really interesting. Something they weren't able to do the last 2 years. They haven't been able to run the ball on the ground, and that was with Leonard Fournette. So Darius Geis is a good running back, and he's actually made some statements last season that kind of rallied, stirred up the tide maybe a little bit. But we'll see. He'll finally get his chance to kind of back up those statements.
What type of back is he? I mean, is he a type of back like Bo Scarborough? Is he Damian Harris?
He probably has more moves to him than like a Fournette does. He's not as much of a just he's got a lot of balance. He's kind of a versatile back. He's really good back. He's probably he is in my opinion the best back Alabama has seen so far. So he's a guy that can hurt you in a lot of ways. LSU likes to throw to their running backs too, so that's another way that Alabama will have to work on. It's just another factor Alabama will have to work on. It'll be really interesting to see how they use him. Obviously, during last year's game, he was pretty much a non-factor. He had 2 carries for 8 yards, but I expect him to have much more of a say in the game. I'm not sure how successful he'll be, like I said, against that Alabama run defense, but I do think that he'll at least have more opportunity this game to kind of show what he's got.
You're listening to the BamaInsider.com podcast. This is Kyle Henderson and Tony Tsoukalas coming to you from Philly Boys in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, just a couple days away from LSU taking on Alabama right here at Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa. Game time set for 7 p.m. In what should be a packed house at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Alabama been slicing through the competition as of late, defeating Arkansas 41-9, then defeating Tennessee 45-7. Both of those teams started freshman quarterbacks. Nick Saban talked about LSU this week and said that the LSU will be the toughest competition that Alabama has played thus far. Would you agree with that?
That's tough because that Florida State team they played week 1, it was right about on par with what this LSU team is. I'm not as sold on the fact that Florida State would have been a playoff team with Francois. They just don't seem to have it for me. But that being said, they were still a tough team. They had, plenty of time to prepare for Alabama. So I kind of think these two situations between that game and the one coming up this week are a little bit similar in terms of the amount of talent Alabama will be facing. And, LSU had an extra week to prepare for Alabama as well. So it'll be interesting. I think you could make the argument that this week is harder, and I think ultimately that's what I would say. But it's probably close between this one and the opener from what, the toughest competition that they face.
LSU is 6-2 on the season and 3-1 in SEC play. Marquee wins. I mean, you can't really say that marquee win is against Syracuse, but Syracuse did beat Clemson. So LSU.
Well, they beat Auburn.
Yes, but I'm just kind of reading through the schedule. They did beat Syracuse 35-26, and they did beat Auburn 27-23, as you just said, and then they beat Ole Miss 2 weeks ago 40-24. Alabama beat Ole Miss 60-63. You can't compare scores, but I mean it is what it is. Going into this game for Alabama, what's the health status for Alabama? It seems like they're pretty much healthy for the most part.
They could probably be at full strength. Nick Saban said that Josh Jacobs, who he had a foot injury against Tennessee, that kind of had him go to the locker room in the fourth quarter. Nick Saban said he'd be fine. The only real question right now is Deshaun Hand. Obviously, he had that MCL strain against Ole Miss. He's missed the last 3 games. Alabama's done fine without him, but it would obviously be beneficial to have him back for this game. And Nick Saban said that that's more of a game-time decision. They're going to kind of see what he's like and during the pregame and kind of make a decision from there. If he does play, I expect him to be in a somewhat limited role just because of the depth that Alabama has on the defensive line. But I think they'll take any help they can get against this LSU running attack.
Isaiah Buggs is one player who's really stepped up this season for Alabama, the Mississippi Gulf Coast transfer. This season, 32 tackles on the season, which is actually 4th on the team. I know people want to see Deshaun Hannon, and they're curious about him, but Isaiah Buggs certainly has been able to hold it down. Yeah,
he's a big reason why they don't have to rush Deshaun Hand back. He's handled against the run really well. He's provided some pass rush too. He's somebody that I think has really stepped up, and it's kind of funny because he's somebody that LSU probably thought at one point that they were going to have on their side for this game, and he ended up committing to Alabama in December, and I'm sure Alabama's pretty thankful of that.
You were on the SEC teleconference this week. Ed Orgeron also talked about Raekwon Davis. What did he say?
As another player that, Ed Orgeron recruited both Buggs and Davis to go to LSU. So just imagine, right now, if both of those players would have chosen LSU, Alabama might be in a little bit of trouble. But, Orgeron was really complimentary of Davis. He said that, he actually said he loves that kid. And he said that Davis is a rare talent and will be a first-round pick. Obviously he's just a sophomore right now, but that's high praise. And it's not unjustified either because you've seen what Alabama does with defensive linemen, and Raekwon certainly looks like he could be the next in line to do big things there.
Switching over to LSU's defense, Ardon Key seems healthy. What type of player is he for LSU?
He's a difference maker for them, and he's definitely somebody that they're going to have to know where he is on the field at all times. He had somewhat of a slow start to the season, but he's kind of working his way back, and I think he's going to be somebody that's going to be really big for them in this game. If they're going to be successful, they're going to need players like him to really step up and make a difference. Maybe make some plays and cause some turnovers. And they're going to need those kind of little breaks to happen.
Alabama opens up as a 21.5-point favorite against LSU. Buying that?
I think that has a lot to say with the fact that that LSU might not score that much. So, 21 points sounds a lot if LSU's scoring, but if LSU gets 10 points, could I see a 30? You said 21.5. Could I see a 33-10 game? That would cover the spread.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility. I know 21.5 sounds like a lot, especially when you look at this rivalry and how close some of these games have been. But this year with LSU's, that game against Ole Miss, LSU did not complete a pass to a wide receiver.
Oh my
the
goodness.
whole game. It's just
you
can't do that against Alabama. They'll find a way to shut that down. If they can't have a passing game, I could definitely see Alabama covering the spread.
Alabama led on rushing by Damian Harris, who has netted 697 yards and 10 touchdowns. Talk about his play, and he seems to just continue to really produce weekly for Alabama.
Yeah, he's been really, really dependable. I'm not sure if it's because he's fresh. He's battled injuries in the past. He seems 100% healthy, which I think probably has made the biggest difference. He slimmed down a little bit, but I don't actually think that that's really the difference. I think it's more just a health standpoint. He's a guy that can do everything for Alabama. He can catch. He can break tackles. He's elusive. What is he averaging? Like 8 yards, 8 point something yards a carry.
His average is still 8.6 yards per carry, and he's only touched the football 81 times this year.
Yeah, and he's also very unselfish, and I think that you can't understate how important that is because a lot of big backs like that, he's a guy that maybe on another school would be more in the running for a Heisman, but that's not the route Alabama's doing, and he's actually embraced that, and he'll be the first one to tell you that he doesn't mind the shared carries, and he thinks it's almost an advantage. So, having a mindset like that is something that, is invaluable when you're trying to work for a bigger goal, and that's what Alabama's trying to do.
You're listening to the BamaInsider.com podcast. We're coming to you from Philly Boys in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where you can come in and get your tailgate special. $49.99. You get a ton of cheesesteak, and you get 3 feet of fries. I know we always eat it up here at Philly Boys. So come in, tell them BamaInsider.com sent you, and on Saturday is a perfect time to get your tailgate special with it being a 7 o'clock kick. We will, of course, have continuing coverage of this weekend's game on BamaInsider.com. My name is Kyle Henderson alongside Tony Tsoukalas, along with Andrew Bone. We make up BamaInsider.com. Talking about the play of Jalen Hurts. On the season, he is 95 of 151, 62% per game, 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns. He's also rushed for 572 yards and 6 touchdowns, 22-1 as a starter. Talk about his play.
Yeah, he's been great. I mean, he does a lot of things well, and, I know he's always under such a scrutiny, but, he's, when talking about Alabama, Ed Orgeron said that, Jalen Hurts is what makes this team go, and I think it is what makes the offense go right now. He can provide an extra threat in the run game. He's proved that, when he needs to make throws, he can make them. And I think this game will be a big opportunity for him, because he's going up against one of the better defenses he'll see. If he can make a statement against this game, he can quiet a lot of those critics. Obviously, he'll have other opportunities to do that down the line, but this is a big one for him. This is a game that he can really prove himself.
Have we seen a difference from Jalen at the beginning of the season to this season?
It's hard to say because I'd almost lean to. I think we've seen a difference between this season and last season. I'm not sure if we've seen a drastic difference between him and the beginning.
I would probably agree with that. It seems like his play has just been what it is. It's been rather consistent for the most part. I mean, the thing about it is it's incredible after the game how much criticism there is on Jalen. And there was even more so when we saw Tua get in against Tennessee and we saw what Tua is capable of. What are your thoughts? I mean, is there a quarterback battle brewing like in the future here at Alabama?
I don't see a scenario, except for the fact that, if Hurts was to get hurt, then obviously. But I don't see a scenario in which you take out a guy that all he does is win. It's just too hard to do. And I think Tua is a great quarterback. He's definitely flashed that this season, and I think in the future he'll be a great option for Alabama. But it's going to be really hard to substitute someone that has only lost one game. And in that one loss, he almost had the game-winning touchdown. So it's really hard to knock Jalen Hurts. It's a luxury. Alabama fans seem to be almost whining over the fact that that they have 2 quarterbacks, but it should be a luxury. I mean, not many teams have someone in Tungo Vailoa that can come in and be that great of a backup. It's almost like Alabama put puts in their second strings, and that's when they really run past teams because they're fresh. Alabama has so much depth on this team. It's incredible.
Looking at the offensive stats for Alabama, I mean, they're scoring 43 points per game. Yards per game, they're averaging 298. Passing yards, they're averaging 201 per game. So, I mean, the offense is productive, and, I mean, they're smashing teams, especially in the first and second quarter of the game where they've outscored the opponents in the first quarter of the season 107-9, if you can believe that.
They've gotten out to great starts, and that's what's allowed them to have these blowouts is because they catch teams out front, and then they just never let go. And I think it just kind of shell shocks some teams, and then by the time that they can gather themselves, they're down by 21 points. Alabama has had, like you said, incredible success in the first quarter. And that's another credit to, we were talking about Jalen Hurts. He's really been able to establish a momentum on opening drives or maybe their second possessions and stuff like that. And Alabama's defense has been able to get the other team off the field as well. That's a deadly combination, and it seems a lot of times by halftime the game's already over.
What was Saban's demeanor this week for this LSU game? We saw him speak on Monday and on Wednesday.
Wednesday he was really happy,
right?
I mean, maybe it was just because he just his birthday was on Tuesday.
Birthday hangover a little bit.
Birthday was on Tuesday, so maybe he just maybe he got that gift that he's been wanting or something. But maybe that number 2 ranking was the gift that he was wanting. But no, he seemed chipper. I mean, he was very, very happy. So he said that there's been a good week of practice. So I'll take his word for it. I mean, we have gotten to see virtually none of practice this week. We've only had these really short media viewing periods, so it's really hard for me to kind of take a judge of how Alabama's looked during practice because we normally don't get that much viewing time, and this week we have gotten virtually none. So
as we round out the podcast, what was your take on the college football rankings? You had Georgia at number 1, you had Alabama at number 2, then you had Notre Dame followed by Clemson.
I don't necessarily buy the Notre Dame hype as much, but that's something that I can understand. That they've looked pretty good. I for whatever reason I just don't buy them, and maybe that's just because I saw Alabama blow them out, and that's not fair because it's a totally different team. But it's really hard for me to buy Notre Dame. It seems like they're always hyped and then they never really produce. But I'm willing to write that one off. I think Clemson's a great team. Here's my thought with Alabama and Georgia. I think the playoff committee has said that they want to treat every week as its own week. If you were going to go in right now, based on schedule, based on what they've done, you would give Georgia the number 1 team. That's what if they stick by their guns and do exactly what they say that they're going to do. I think Georgia has to be the number 1 team right now. Alabama has to be the number 2 team. But I wouldn't be surprised if they do stick to this model of keeping every week fresh. Alabama's playing three more ranked teams before they meet Georgia in the SEC championship game, if they do meet Georgia in the SEC championship game. If both teams run the table, I wouldn't be surprised if Alabama actually jumps Georgia. They have a harder remaining schedule, and I would imagine that they're not that close behind Georgia in the minds of the committee. So, there's nothing to say that Alabama won't re-jump Georgia even before they theoretically would play Georgia. That's something that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Let me ask you this hypothetical before we close out. Let's say Alabama and Georgia finish out undefeated. They meet in the SEC championship game. Let's say Georgia defeats Alabama. Does the loser of the SEC championship game with only 1 loss still get into the college football playoffs?
I think it would depend on a few things. I lean to no. I do not.
So it's almost a playoff play-in game.
It would almost be a quarterfinal game. Yeah. I don't think that, and I think Alabama would especially, because of their schedule. I don't think they could survive a loss as much. Georgia has that win over Notre Dame. The committee's really high on Notre Dame, so that will play into its favor. I think it would also matter, is Georgia the number 1 team? I think that would probably help out Georgia's cause. It'd be hard to bump them from number 1 to number 5 following 1 loss. it would help.
Well, that's kind of the reason I ask you if those two teams met and they were 1-2, is a loss to the number 1 or number 2 team good enough to get you out of the playoffs? And then this is my theory too. Let's say that does happen if Georgia is to defeat Alabama, right? So you have number 1 defeating number 2. Even if you move Alabama to the number 4 spot, would they pair them again in the college football semifinals?
That's another thing I don't think they would want to do.
I don't think so either.
They say that stuff's not supposed to matter, but I really don't think that the human element of it. I don't see them wanting to do that, and I think they could possibly avoid doing that. Also, not that it should matter either. You should be taking the best 4 teams, but is it really fair for either Alabama or Georgia to beat the other team and then to have to play them the next game? Albeit it'll be a month away, but is that really fair to have to beat them 2 times in a row?
This is Notre Dame's remaining schedule. They got Wake Forest, then they take on Miami, who is also undefeated. That's a game on November 11th. They take on Navy, and then they take on Stanford. And they're playing in Palo Alto, California in that game. Notre Dame and Stanford kind of gets wacky sometimes. Clemson at 7-1 right now. They take on NC State. Then they play Florida State, Citadel, and South Carolina.
Both those teams, I don't see a loss there.
Oh my
I don't see a loss in either of those teams.
Oklahoma at the number 5 spot. Take on Oklahoma State. That game could go either way. Then they got TCU. TCU is a 1-loss team. They play Kansas. Then they take on West Virginia. So maybe Oklahoma slips up somewhere around there, you could say.
Yeah.
Ohio State, 7-1. At Iowa. Iowa has played teams tough. Remember, we saw them almost beat Penn State. Then they got Michigan State, which is going to be tough. They got Illinois, who is terrible this year. And then they take on Michigan.
So they got. You talk about Oklahoma. You talk about Ohio State. They've both got team schedules that would probably help them pad their resume to get into those top spots. Wisconsin's undefeated as well.
Yeah, so Wisconsin and Miami. Let me read those 2 teams. Wisconsin is number 9 in the country, 8-0 on the season, 4 in the AP and 4 in the coaches poll. They take on Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, and then are at Minnesota.
And then they'll have the Big Ten.
The Big Ten championship.
Obviously another thing you got to think about too is if Wisconsin runs the table, they're making it. They're not going to take. They're definitely going to put in an undefeated Big Ten champ. I don't think Wisconsin are on the table, but talk about teams that control their own destiny. Miami controls its own destiny as well.
Yeah, Miami, they take on Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, Virginia, and Pittsburgh.
And then they'll have to play Clemson.
Yep.
Both those teams, I think they're kind of being written off because no one really expects them to go undefeated. But if they go undefeated, obviously if Miami goes undefeated, Clemson's not making it. They control their own. Both those teams control their own destiny. I don't expect them to win out, but you can't ignore them now because they do control their own destiny.
Lot to talk about. Good stuff, Tony. We're coming to you from Philly Boys in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Be sure and stop here on Saturday and pick up your tailgate special, only $49.99. Tons of cheesesteak and 3 feet of fries. Be sure and tell them BamaInsider.com sent you. My name is Kyle Henderson. He is Tony Tsoukalas, and we are coming to you from Philly Boys. Have a great day and continue to check out BamaInsider.com as we got tons of coverage coming back to you on BamaInsider.com.